Welcome to Accounting Life with Jotham Tai, a space where we'll talk about anything and everything surrounding the people that grind through your month-end accounting close.
Hi everyone. Today's episode is Learning and Development in Accounting. Our guest today is Kristen Rampe, Managing Partner at Rosenberg Associates. On this episode, we talk about different forms of staff development, contrasting styles of leadership, and the growing shortage of talent in accounting. Now, I'll hand it over to our host, Gapify CEO Jotham Tai.
Hey, Kristen, how's it going? Thanks for joining us on today's podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jotham. Nice to see you again.
I know we've known each other for a really long time. The audience does not need to know how many years, but I'm excited to reconnect with you. I know. The eyes. If I did share that.
I was trying to do the math on it, and I was
like
a long time.
After you do the math, I'll probably blush and I'll turn very red, which probably would not be good for the aesthetics of this podcast recording.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'd love to really dive deep into, I think, a concept and also just like an area of the profession. I've said this before in previous podcast episodes. I don't think professional development and people management and talent management is discussed enough. It's almost like as accountants, we're expected to do work. We're supposed to be happy no matter what, but you just do the work and you move on. But we know in this environment, things are quickly changing. So I really wanted to, get your perspectives, and glad you're able to join us today.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to be here. It's such a good topic for us to talk about. Absolutely.
20 minutes won't do it justice, but we'll try. And just to kick things off, again, without you and I having to age ourselves, if you had to think about when you first started the profession and what talent development or people development meant, what did you see when you first went into the profession?
Yeah, well, a lot of on-the-ground training, a fair amount, actually a fair amount of classroom too. So I started at the Big Four, and we had, 2 weeks of being holed up in a hotel, learning all this stuff. Of course, at that time, it's like a fire hose, and you have no idea what you're really learning. But there's some of that classroom stuff, tons on the job. One thing that I do think was really helpful to me as a new person in an undated time eons ago was just working with really talented professionals that were willing to train, willing to teach, and do it in a way that didn't totally berate you, because I certainly saw plenty of that going on. I was fortunate to get pretty good training through the Big Four, I felt, overall. At the same time, you're just working dreadful hours, and it felt like too much and a little bit of has to be a better way. I also then did some amount of work at a regional firm, and the training there, I think it's really, I've had exposure to all different sizes firms, and it really, gigantic firms have a ton of resources, great training. Smaller firms, like some of our clients right now, there might be 10 employees total, and you want to know what kind of training they have? None. Not really. It's all just on the job. But I think recognizing, for firm leaders to recognize the value of the training and in whatever size they're at, and prioritizing it in whatever way makes sense for their organization is really important to the success of their firm, but also the development of the profession, right? Because if we don't train,
absolutely,
well, where are we going to be in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, Kristen, I actually have similar experience as you, in that I had the Big Four towards the later part of my audit career, and then I had kind of a mid-sized firm experience, and the training was very different. I mean, on one hand, the Big Four, it was formal. You had those annual or semi-annual get-togethers. Sometimes they become more like parties and training sessions, and then there's the I don't want to call them actually like top 30, I think. But that was not as robust, but it required you to really just learn on the job. And the amount of learning I felt I got from that experience was a lot more than the set formal training that I got at the Big Four. And it's probably how just life generally works out. But it's interesting to think back about where I learned the most as a profession. I think KPMG was great and the Big Four was great because you got the exposure of different industries. But in terms of like actual training that's fed to you, very different, but with very different results. This is why this is fun. Like I don't think about these things until we have these types of conversations.
Absolutely. And I think in both cases, at least my experience has been, it's very, the programming can make a difference, but the real learning is so people dependent, and you're lucky when you get paired up with or are fortunate to be in the right situation with someone who's willing to train and mentor and teach. And then sometimes you get paired with someone who isn't. And one of my favorite not favorite lines, is when managers and partner type people complain, well, Jotham should know how to do that. He should know how to do that by now. And it's like, well, maybe so. Maybe in your mind, that's a skill that this person should have learned along the way. But the reality is they don't know it clearly by the work product, that they're showing you. So what are you going to do about it, right? I think it's a dismissive. Oh, they should know that. Well, great. So they don't. And, you need to work on it. So what can you teach them? And having that interest in development of the next generation is really invaluable.
Right. Well, you don't want to be that senior auditor where your partner asks if ASC 842 and you kind of don't, but you have to say, yeah, kind of. So I think in my early years, I felt like that pressure was there. But yeah, I'm imagining now, and it's been a while since I've been in public accounting, and I know that's where you specialized in. But even as I think about the dynamic in industry, I think there is more of an openness to like being transparent about what you don't know and what you need to learn, and actually promoting the time and effort to seek that knowledge versus before it was like, hey, I'm going to come at you with these trainings, but it didn't feel like it was like intentional. It was kind of just like part of the process. And do you see the same thing, or maybe is my experience maybe just unique from my specific vantage point?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that people, as individuals who are growing themselves, being willing to say, hey, I don't understand this, and could you help explain something to me, is absolutely like a really huge trait. I think, for myself, when I think back to when I was, like 21 and a half, and trying to learn some things, and I'm a little bit older now. I didn't know them, and you don't want to. It was hard for me back then to show up and ask because I didn't want to look like an idiot. I'll never forget, though, a story that I wanted to be sure to share because it has just like a little bit of Gapify fun connection because it relates to accruals specifically. And it is a public accounting story, but I was auditing a software company, and I was assigned to audit accruals, and I was in my second year, so I was supposed to know how to audit accruals. I'm going to admit I didn't really have the best idea of what I should be doing. So I could follow, look at last year's work paper, figure out what I should be doing, get some supporting documents, try to find numbers that match. But I was, the quality of that particular audit from the first pass person who was a new senior associate was really not that high. And I remember I had this experienced senior, Nicolas, was a French guy, and he was supervising me, and he must have asked me a few questions that gave him enough indication that I didn't know what I was doing. And then he said, why don't I sit down and walk you through, I remember him asking me these questions, and I just didn't have great answers. He said, why don't I walk you through how this works? And we spent 45 minutes doing T accounts on some hypothetical, legal invoice accrual situation. But I learned so much. And I became a way better auditor, or, an accountant, whoever you are, you're going to become a way better at that job when you get it. So I think that, I remember that story forever because it was really impactful in my career, knowing hey, the fact that this guy was willing to take, back in the Big Four, 45 minutes out of your day, that's a lot of time to get something done. To literally do intermediate accounting, T accounts with me was super helpful. So I just think, those people who are listening to this podcast, if you're looking for ways to help people, sometimes you really got to go back to basics, even for someone who should know, right? Like I should know, but I don't. And he went back to the basics, but then it was good. It's great. T accounts.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear, just sticking with the Nikolai example. So it sounds like that happened. You had the luxury of someone being proactively mindful about giving you training and knowledge. And do you see that like being any more prominent, like nowadays, like where people are, thinking about, hey, I'm a leader, I need to make sure my team is equipped with the right knowledge? Or do you see that being the same, and maybe really not much of a change from your audit days to where things are now?
Yeah, I still think it's very, very person dependent. I think those people who have an interest in retaining and developing their people, which is so much more of an issue today, and are willing to recognize the benefits they're stepping up to do it. At the same time, I talk with firm leaders at small to mid-sized firms all across the country. The smallest, like I said, maybe they've got 10 employees at the low end, upper end, a couple hundred, which is a big range, but there are plenty that are still just, you should know. In fact, there was a guy the other day who was a 3-partner firm. He's one of the founders. I wish I could remember exactly how he said it. He was like, "Oh, there's people, they want me to like talk to them and help them with stuff." He's like, "I just want them to do their job, and like,
I
sounds great.
mean,
Okay, good luck." He's like, "But I can't find any staff." And I'm like, "I wonder why." I don't know. What could be the problem?
well, yeah, this conversation definitely segues into something I want to ask you about, which is the short of accountants. But yeah, I want to double down on that point. And as obvious as it may seem, that if you invest time in your team's development, it usually translates into not only retention, but I would say added motivation. And I'll give you my example from my audit days. When you shared that, it reminded me too. When I was at KPMG, I got put on a restatement, of course, not in my control. And as you know, restatements are crazy.
Mhm.
But I knew nothing about like revenue accounting. And I didn't, back then it was SAB 101, 104. So this was way before 606. But I had a partner actually. And this partner, if he's listening, knows who he is, spent a whole evening, it had to be evening, of course, breaking down like how to review contracts. We went through like collectability, delivery, and all the components. And it was very new to me, but the way he taught me the details in a classroom format not only helped me get up to speed versus just throwing me into it and figuring out and rolling forward last year's work papers, but it also kind of gave me the buy-in. Like, hey, I appreciate learning this. Thank you for doing that. Now, I'm not going to work on all-nighter because I got that excited, but it definitely like added to my motivation to do more and help out the overall team. So there's definitely like more trade-offs like beyond or above the surface of just this squishy idea of like sharing knowledge. There's like there's a more elements to it, and it's very interesting to think about and recall now.
Yeah, well, another example of the problem it causes when you don't make that investment. I have another client that the partners, like many in the public accounting world, right, really focused on client work, client service, client service, client service. We're going to do the work, I got to do the hours, we got to do the work, the hours. We're trying to help them figure out an updated system to allocate their partner income. And they're really struggling with assigning value to anything other than revenue brought in or billable hours. And funny enough, they both want to retire. And funny enough, they don't have anyone to replace them because they developed 2 people that are now full. So they, what they've done in essence is, because they haven't taken the time to train enough people. I mean, it's not like they never did it, but they haven't trained enough people. There's no one to take over their practice because they didn't invest in enough people, and they were just focused on, I need to get my work done, rather than part of my work is developing the next generation.
So that's very interesting, Kristen, because I have been hearing it on the news, and I haven't really done much digging outside of what I hear from the news and also people in my network, that there is an increased activity of private equity firms picking up these practices because partners don't have a succession plan. Is that like a real thing? And is it partly related to what you described?
It is a real thing. It tends to be a larger firm phenomenon rather than a smaller firm phenomenon. It's also that partners want to cash out, they want to get their money, and they may not have people internally that want that. There's some people who just, hey, I want the job. I don't want to be an owner. I want to do a great job and not not advanced. And so that's a great situation for that situation. It's a great situation. But yeah, so private equity is out there. It's happening mostly with larger firms. The talent shortage, though, I think is pervasive, and I don't think they're suddenly going to win the talent wars just by having PE come in and take over. In fact, I think long term, it'll be interesting to see if that is helpful or if it reverts back.
Yeah, well, so on the topic now of the shortage in the profession, I guess just as a general way to kick things off, what would you attribute the shortage to? And I know that's a very loaded question, but in your own words, what do you think are the key contributors to our profession being in this state now?
Yeah, I think that, we've always had a glamour problem. No one is like, oh, accounting. Like, gosh, boy, if there's a career I want to pursue. I mean, really, Jotham, if you think about all the people ever who got an accounting degree, is it even 5% that were like, oh yeah, I've always wanted to go into accounting? Or is it, because most of it, we got here because someone thought it was a good idea. Maybe you took a class, it was fine. You didn't know what else you wanted to study. You liked math, but you didn't want to do math. So that's why we're here. So I think it's we have a kind of just realistically sort of a dorky reputation historically. Now those of us who are in it know that, like, look at you and me, Jotham. I mean, what's not to love about being an accountant, right? So it's not really true, but when you're 18 and you're picking a major, I think accounting just inherently is kind of historically unattractive. But that hasn't been a new thing. I also think that the comp for the work is a bad ratio, right? You've got to show up, you've got to work your butt off. You never get to go skiing or go on spring break, and you're going to get paid like okay, especially right in your first 10 years. When you really get up there, the income can be fantastic. But even, at your first several years, and it's good coming out of college, it's not nothing, but I think that's a problem. There's a lot of talk today about the 150-hour rule and if that's really what's tanking it. I do think that has an impact, but I also think that there are plenty of firms that are being flexible to allow talent to rise without the CPA designation, which is its own discussion of, is that good, is that bad, how much of that do we need, fine. But if you've got a really talented person who can actually do all the work, has the appropriate technical knowledge, just doesn't have the designation, well, the only thing they can't do, is sign certain things and own certain entities. But other than that, they can do all of the work, and often they're quite content to sit there and do all the work. We're still short people. So I think comp has to come up. I think the ridiculous hour busy season craziness situation has to go down, or a little bit of both, get that in line with what people want, and then solve some of these other challenges out there. But we gotta pound the pavement. I go to middle schools and high schools to try to be like, it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna take like a very concerted, really broad effort to rebrand, on the school side, like what accounting really is, because it used to be traditionally, in our cubicles, crunching numbers and staring at our cubicle plant. But I mean, you and I know that it's, more than that. It's being able to understand business transactions, being able to understand capital markets, and putting together financial statements. So none of that comes across right now when you pitch accounting as a major to any college student. And so, I like how you put it. Yeah.
I was to say, maybe you and I right now, maybe we need to rebrand the profession, right? Maybe we need to drop accounting. We got to convince everybody that we're not going to use that word anymore because it's got some negative associations. And we're just going to be called something freaking awesome that's cool and modern and fun and attractive.
I got an idea for you. So I love, again, these podcasts are so allows for the creativity that we accountants want and the next generation of accountants want. Here's one: financial engineer.
Yeah.
No.
Well, I think business analyst, right? And I know business analyst is its own thing, but don't we analyze business data? I mean, computers and AI are going to do all of the actual accounting. I mean, who really, they can do it. Now, do we need to check things? Analyze? Yes. Go.
The numbers still have to be understood. Yeah. As far as the context of the business transaction to drive it. So there's some financial component too that I think is important to have in that word. I agree though. I think we should ditch the word accountants maybe. Oh, wait, that's
Yes.
controversial. Let me think about that.
I'm okay, Jotham. If you were worried about offending me personally, and I know that's what you were thinking about, I'm good. You can drop it. Actually, here's a funny story. The other day I was rooting through some stuff in the basement, and I put some things out on a table, and my kid's down there, and he picks up this giant piece of cardboardy paper, and he says, "Should we frame this? I don't think it was my CPA certificate. I think it was like my AI CPA. They used to print a big membership sign,
Oh, yeah.
like CPA member." And I was like, although other funny story, I used to date a guy who had his CPA certificate framed on his bedroom wall right by his bedside table. And I was like, the guy for me. I mean, we're both in accounting, but I'm not attached to it, and it's got a bad reputation. That's what you do. Like, you rebrand when you've got something that maybe needs a new, fresh infusion of people.
I think so. And I think the more first of all, we got to do something about it, right? Because this is having real impact to the markets. I had coffee, it was last week or 2 weeks ago, with a CEO of a company that just went public. They had to beg EY for audit resources, but EY had a shortage of audit resources. So I think the timing of in these days with the market, I guess it's not a bad thing for IPOs to be postponed. But anyway, long story short, like, it's now impacting the ability for capital markets to operate in the way they should. And hey, us accountants are like a big part of that. And geez, yeah, I think we need to, Kristen, for our next episode, I'd love to have you back and talk about just riffing on like creative ideas. I think like some of the ones I've heard about are very, plain and vanilla like ideas. And even I've kind of shared some publicly too about, college roadshow and, on the retention side, obviously, like emphasizing, and I still believe, by the way, on like comp increases especially on the public accounting side. But I think the rebranding takes it at a deeper fundamental level that is exciting to talk about.
We'll get a panel. We'll have a marketing professional, couple of creative accountant people like you and me and some others, and we can do some brainstorming and some riffing, and then we'll have Barry Melanson show up, and we'll be like, "Listen, Barry, we solved the problem for you. Here's the answer. We're gonna rebrand. This is what we're gonna call it now. We're gonna remove all accounting words from the name. It'll be like a subtitle, like one of the things we do is accounting, but we got a new name. Let's do it.
We got Barry covered. So yeah, I think we've made that would be a huge contribution to the profession. And gosh, we really, all joking aside though, it does concern me. And I know we don't have a lot of time in this episode for me to express like how deeply concerning it is to hear what's going on. But I think, and actually like even before this episode, Kristen, our team have already been thinking about like how to reposition and rebrand this podcast to be, something that promotes the, or helps maybe solve for the problem that we're seeing. But it's multi-dimensional, a lot of different complicated factors. But you and I are creative people, so we can figure this stuff out.
Yes, I agree.
Well, Kristen, this is a good start to, I think, what will be a series of conversations. I thank you for joining us today, and I'll, in the meantime, be thinking about other titles for the profession outside of accounting. I don't think financial engineering is going to stick.
That is brainstorming. There's no bad ideas right now. We can put up anything you got.
I'll be ready next time.
Okay. Wonderful.
All right. Thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for stopping by. We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want more information, please check us out at gapify.com, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.